Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to really cut through the noise and get you right to the heart of what matters on crucial
Yeah,
topics.
helping you get informed fast.
Exactly. And today, we're embarking on a journey into the mind of, well, a true titan of industry, a figure whose influence is so pervasive, you've likely interacted with his legacy just today.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, think about it. That sleek aluminum device, maybe in your hand right now, the intuitive interface on your screen, maybe even the whole idea of a seamless digital ecosystem.
It's everywhere.
From the Macintosh, which really brought computing to the masses in a new way, to the iPod, which completely redefined, our relationship with music,
Totally.
and then the iPhone.
Yeah.
I mean, that utterly changed how we interact with the world and each other. Apple's creations, they have this incredible, almost like mystical allure.
They're not just tools.
No, they don't just solve problems. They become iconic. They get deeply integrated into our culture. They're aspirational almost.
That's a good word for it.
So the big question is, what is it? What unique philosophy, what singular method could consistently produce such insanely great products? Products that didn't just compete, but often redefined entire industries.
Yeah,
It's got to be more than just good engineering, right? There's some deeper current running through it all.
indeed. And this deep dive is really custom tailored for you, our listener, to dissect the very essence of that. We're looking at Apple's co-founder, Steve Jobs, and his unique product development and design philosophy.
Okay.
Our main guide today will be some really revealing excerpts from Walter Isaacson's, authoritative biography, Steve Jobs. Plus, we've pulled in some other key supporting materials to try and paint a really comprehensive picture.
Great. So what's the mission here?
Well, our mission is pretty clear. We're here to unpack the core principles that really guided Jobs. We'll be focusing on his almost fanatical user-centric obsession.
Which you hear so much about.
Exactly. And his unshakable belief in simplicity, his, let's be honest, notoriously demanding leadership style.
Right. The controversial part.
Yeah. And crucially, his unique way of integrating technology with broader humanistic principles like the liberal arts.
Okay.
So this isn't just, a history lesson. It's meant to be your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed on what we're calling the Steve Jobs method.
Got it. So peeling back the layers of genius and maybe some of the controversy too.
That's the plan. The foundation, obsessive user experience, and radical simplicity.
Okay, let's unpack this foundational principle then. Jobs' obsessive focus on user experience and radical simplicity. Now, when we talk about perfection, we often think about the visible stuff, right? The polished surface. But what seems to have truly set Jobs apart was this almost fanatical pursuit of perfection, and not just for what you, the user, could see. Can you give us an example that really hits home how extreme this could get, maybe for something the user would never actually interact with?
Yeah, absolutely. The Apple II's circuit board, it's kind of legendary for this. The sources, Isaacson's book especially, they reveal that Jobs' drive for perfection went even to parts of a product that users would never see, the internal components.
Right.
And this philosophy, it wasn't just some corporate slogan he came up with. It was like deeply ingrained in him from when he was young.
From his father, wasn't it?
Exactly. His father was a master craftsman, and he instilled in him this idea that a real drive for perfection meant caring about the craftsmanship even of the parts unseen.
The classic paint the back of the fence idea.
Precisely. You paint the back of the fence just as well as the front, even if nobody will ever see it. It speaks to an underlying integrity, right? A promise of quality that permeates every single layer.
And we see a fantastic, almost like you said, legendary application of this with the Apple II's circuit board. You'd think an internal component hidden away inside the case wouldn't need to be, aesthetically pleasing.
You'd think.
Yet Jobs apparently rejected the initial design because the lines were not straight enough, even for something totally invisible to the end user. He wanted the internal layout to be as elegant and symmetrical as the outside.
And what's truly fascinating here, I think, what goes beyond just like aesthetic obsession, is how this level of detailed focus signals a profound psychological strategy almost.
How so?
Well, by demanding perfection where it couldn't be seen, Jobs cultivated an internal culture of uncompromising quality. It sent a really clear message to his engineers, his designers, Every single aspect, visible or not, contributes to the overall quality and integrity of the product.
Ah, okay. So it sets a standard internally.
Exactly. And that meticulous internal craftsmanship, you have to assume, then inevitably showed up in the visible user experience. It created this almost unbreakable trust in the brand, subconsciously maybe.
Right. You might not know the circuit board looks good.
But you feel the difference, perhaps. In the product's overall quality, its reliability. For Jobs, it wasn't just about functionality. It was about this holistic sense of excellence, a kind of silent guarantee of integrity baked right in.
Okay, so this deep-seated demand for internal perfection, it naturally led to how users would ultimately interact with the product.
Yeah.
And here, Jobs introduced another fiercely held belief, one that created some, let's say, interesting tension and sometimes outright conflict.
Absolutely. His passion for perfection, as Isaacson puts it, led him to indulge his instinct to control.
Control. That's a key word with Jobs.
Very key. He had this strong conviction that allowing too much user customization, letting people, as he apparently put it, jack various things into their computers.
Right, like add-on cards and peripherals.
Yeah, he saw that as a threat to a seamless end-to-end user experience. Now, this might sound totally counterintuitive today, right? In the tech world, open platforms, user mods, they're often celebrated, seen as empowering.
Sure.
But Jobs saw it differently. He saw it as a potential dilution of the carefully crafted experience he was trying to deliver. Too many variables, maybe.
Right, and we see a classic clash over this exact issue with Steve Wozniak, Apple's co-founder, a hacker at heart.
Oh, yeah, was. Ever the engineer who loved to tinker. He wanted the Apple II to have 8 expansion slots.
8? Wow.
Yeah, for maximum user flexibility. He pictured a world where users could easily add all sorts of stuff, customize their machines to the hilt.
And Jobs.
Jobs, already fixated on that singular controlled experience, insisted there be only 2.
Just 2. What for?
Basically, for a printer and a modem. That's it. Primarily to maintain simplicity and, critically, control over that user journey. He believed more slots meant more potential for incompatible components, more complexity, and ultimately a worse user experience for the average person. And the sources note that while Wozniak won the argument that time, he could sense his power waning in the company.
Interesting.
Yeah, this anecdote really illustrates Jobs' strong conviction. Limiting choice could paradoxically enhance the user experience. By tightly controlling the whole ecosystem, he believed he was preventing complexity, preventing potential user frustration from, too many options or things not working together.
So it was about guaranteeing a certain quality standard for everyone.
That was the idea. It created a walled garden, as people say now, yes, but one that was meticulously cultivated for what he saw as an optimal experience.
Which, for you, the listener, raises that important question. How does this approach contrast with more open platforms you might use every day?
Right. And is that trade-off user freedom versus guaranteed seamlessness, is it always worth it? It's a fundamental tension, I think, that lots of product designers still grapple with today. It shapes everything from, gaming consoles to phone operating systems.
Jobs clearly believed he knew what was best for the user, maybe even better than they did themselves.
Oh, absolutely. That was a core part of his belief system. 2, the visionary approach. Intuition, value, and desire over data.
Okay, so if Jobs wasn't letting users dictate the experience through endless customization, and he was obsessing over unseen details, how on earth did he figure out what to build? What was his compass if it wasn't, conventional market research?
Well, this is where his visionary approach really comes into play. Driven by intuition and this focus on creating desire, not just fulfilling stated needs.
And he famously, almost defiantly, rejected conventional market research. Right?
Oh, completely. There's a great story when a reporter from Popular Science asked him about the market research done for the Macintosh.
Yeah.
Jobs apparently just responded by scoffing. Did Alexander Graham Bell do any market research before he invented the telephone?
Wow. That's bold.
It is, and it wasn't just a witty comeback. It was a real profound statement of his belief in visionary leadership.
So it highlights his belief in intuition over, say, reactive data analysis. He wasn't interested in just incrementally improving existing stuff based on what people said they wanted in a survey or a focus group.
Exactly. He aimed to create what people didn't yet know they wanted. He truly believed innovation came from an internal vision, a deep understanding, maybe, of where technology could go and what humans might desire, not from asking them directly.
Which, for you, the listener, it really challenges that widely accepted idea that, market validation has to come before you innovate.
Hmm.
It forces you to consider the courage it takes to actually lead the market, not just respond to it. And, of course, the huge risks that come with that path.
Definitely risky. It's about having this deep, almost prophetic sense of human needs and desires before people can even articulate them.
And this visionary perspective, it ties directly into focusing on the big picture, right? Something called value innovation.
Yes, absolutely. His approach aligns perfectly with a principle from Blue Ocean strategy, which is focus on the big picture, not the numbers.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Well, instead of getting wedded to red oceans, you know, those existing crowded competitive markets where companies just fight fiercely over existing market share, usually by trying to slightly outperform rivals on the same old metrics.
It's like more megahertz or more features.
Right. Instead of that, Jobs aimed for blue oceans. These are previously unknown, uncontested market spaces where there's huge potential for profitable growth because you're creating something fundamentally new.
That's a really critical distinction, isn't it? It contrasts sharply with that concept of marketing myopia.
Explain that a bit.
Well, marketing myopia is the idea that companies often get too focused on just increasing the efficiency of making our products rather than really thinking about and boosting the value those products deliver to customers.
Ah, okay. Like the classic example of the railroad company.
Exactly. They saw themselves as being in the railroad business,
Mhm.
not the transportation business. So they got incredibly efficient at running trains, but they totally missed the rise of cars and airplanes because they weren't focused on the customer's need for transportation.
Right, got it.
And Jobs' method, clearly, leaned heavily into boosting that customer value, often in these unexpected paradigm-shifting ways. He wasn't just making a slightly better computer, he was creating a whole new experience of computing.
Precisely. His philosophy aligns perfectly with that idea of value innovation from Blue Ocean strategy. The goal there is to create a leap in value for both buyers and companies.
A leap in value.
Yeah. And crucially, this means not letting costs drive prices, which is the standard way, right? Figure out your cost, add a margin.
Mhm.
Nor does it mean scaling down utility because high costs block your ability to profit at the strategic price. Instead, it's about delivering such a superior experience or utility, often through that elegant design and integration we talked about, that the perceived value is just disproportionately higher than the cost.
Which explains how Apple products, from the iPod to the iPhone, often commanded those premium prices.
Exactly. They weren't just competing on features, spec for spec, or just on price. They were often creating a whole new category, delivering this unparalleled utility and experience that created a much higher value perception.
So people were willing to pay more because they weren't just buying a gadget.
They were buying into an experience, maybe a lifestyle, a simpler, more elegant way of interacting with technology. They valued that leap.
So he wasn't just building products, he was building desire. It wasn't just about utility, it was about aspiration, about making a statement. Which leads us nicely into how he mastered creating these objects of desire through design and branding.
Yeah, and we see a really fascinating direct parallel drawn in the source material about Elon Musk, actually.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, a former Apple executive, George Blankenship, who's credited with a lot of the Apple Store strategy, he was hired by Tesla.
Right.
And Blankenship explicitly aimed to give Tesla stores that Apple Store vibe. And he wanted to turn the Model S into an object of desire, just like the iPod and iPhone.
So not just focusing on the car's specs, the horsepower, or the battery range alone.
No, it was also about its emotional resonance, its aesthetic appeal, the statement it made about its owner. It's the same playbook. Think about those early iPod commercials, right?
Yep.
Just those sleek silhouettes dancing.
Yeah, no technical specs mentioned at all.
Nope. Just pure joy, movement, style, desire.
And what's fascinating here for you, the listener, is that this goes so far beyond basic product utility. It's about crafting an emotional connection, a sense of aspiration, making the product feel like an integral part of your identity. And that transforms a functional item into a cultural phenomenon. It fosters this deep, almost tribal brand loyalty.
Totally. When you carry an iPhone or use a MacBook, for many people, it feels like an extension of themselves, right? A reflection of their taste, maybe their values.
It really makes you wonder, how could you elevate a purely functional item or service in your world into something truly desired, something people want to be associated with, not just because it works well, but because it speaks to who they are or who they aspire to be.
It's a powerful lesson, isn't it? In branding, perceived value, and just the deep psychology of why we buy things. 3, the culture of demanding excellence. The reality distortion field in action.
Okay, so we've talked about Jobs' obsession with perfection, even in the unseen bits, and his visionary approach that often just ignored conventional wisdom. But here's where we need to dive into the often controversial methods he used to make those visions real.
Right. The culture of demanding excellence.
Yeah, often characterized by his famous reality distortion field. And this path, it wasn't always smooth sailing, was it? In fact, the sources make it pretty clear it was often obnoxious and rough.
Oh, the sources are quite explicit about it. The creation of the Macintosh, for instance. Isaacson writes, "It was a grueling ride, and many egos had been bruised by Jobs' obnoxious and rough management style."
Grueling, bruised egos, obnoxious, rough, those are strong words.
They are. He was known for his incredibly blunt critiques, sudden, sometimes jarring shifts in direction, and this relentless pursuit of what he deemed insanely great, often completely disregarding what others thought was technically possible or, practically feasible.
And this wasn't some hidden secret. It was a well-known kind of defining aspect of his leadership, right? It shaped the whole atmosphere within Apple, especially on those key projects.
Absolutely.
Yet there's this incredible paradox of leadership here, isn't there? Despite that challenging, often confrontational environment. The source, Isaacson again, notes that neither Raskin, nor Wozniak, nor Scully, nor anyone else at the company could have pulled off the creation of the Macintosh. Nor, he says, would it likely have emerged from focus groups and committees. So the very style that bruised all those egos was also arguably essential to his creation. How do we square that?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the sources don't really offer a simple, easy answer. It presents this powerful, if definitely controversial, view of leadership.
Right.
That sometimes maybe extreme demands, even confrontational ones, might be necessary to push teams way beyond their perceived limits to achieve truly groundbreaking results.
Results that conventional methods might miss.
Right. Conventional, consensus-driven methods, as the source suggests, often fail to produce those kinds of revolutionary outcomes because, well, they're designed more for iteration, for incremental improvement, not for true disruption.
And Jobs had this almost messianic belief in his vision.
He did, and that famous reality distortion field, his uncanny ability to convince others to believe in his vision too, sometimes bending their perception of reality, of what was possible, to fit his will.
Which, for you, the listener, especially if you're in any kind of leadership role, raises a critical question. What is the optimal balance between pushing for that extreme excellence and maintaining team morale, psychological safety, harmonious relationships?
Is it even possible to have one without sacrificing the other? Or is there some kind of inherent trade-off when you're pursuing something insanely great, especially when you're operating right at the bleeding edge of innovation?
The sources clearly show the steep price of Jobs' ambition, on the human capital, even while they acknowledge its undeniable success in terms of product.
Absolutely. That drive, that uncompromising vision, it certainly came at a significant cost, especially to human relationships. And there's a really telling anecdote about this from the early days of NXT Computer after he left Apple the first time. It kind of crystallizes his approach.
Okay, what happened?
Well, Jobs and a team member, Daniel Lewin, were visiting campuses trying to get opinions on the next T machine. They met with Mitch Kapor at Harvard. He was the chairman of Lotus Software, a big deal back then.
Right, Lotus 123.
Exactly. So they're having lunch, and Kapor starts slathering butter on his bread. And Jobs, with just his characteristic bluntness, total disregard for social niceties, apparently comments, "Have you ever heard of serum cholesterol?"
Oh, wow. To Mitch Kapor.
Yeah. And Kapor, apparently pretty quick-witted, retorted, "I'll make you a deal. You stay away from commenting on my dietary habits, and I will stay away from the subject of your personality."
Ouch. Humorous but pointed.
Very. It was meant humorously, but Kapor later commented, quite pointedly according to Isaacson, that Jobs' human relationships were not his strong suit.
Understatement of the year, maybe?
Perhaps. But this anecdote, it starkly reveals that core tension, doesn't it? For Jobs, the product's perfection, his vision seemed to trump pretty much everything else, including, basic professional courtesies or tact.
Yeah, sounds like a dinner party you might not want to be at, even if you got an early peek at the next TQ. But, that story really crystallizes how his intense focus, his uncompromising vision, it often just steamrolled over interpersonal grace, over conventional soft skills.
Mm.
And it raises that important question again for you, the listener, and really for any leader. Must a leader sacrifice those conventional social skills for hard-nosed visionary execution? Or at least be willing to push boundaries to a point that makes people really uncomfortable?
Yeah. And what's the long-term impact on an organization, on its culture, when human relationships consistently take a back seat?
It contrasts so sharply with a lot of modern leadership thinking, doesn't it? Like radical candor, which talks about being direct, sure, but always with care and empathy.
Right. Challenge directly, but care personally.
Or even older ideas like the one-minute manager, focusing on positive reinforcement, catching them doing something right to get peak performance.
Jobs' method was definitely far more raw, often relying on, frankly, intimidation and just sheer force of will to drive the results he wanted.
And that same challenging approach, it also made him incredibly adept at taking on incumbents, right, with disruptive innovation.
Yes, definitely. His competitive strategy aligns really strongly with the concept of disruptive technologies, which Clayton Christensen outlined so well in The Innovator's Dilemma.
Okay, remind us what those are exactly.
Well, disruptive technologies are innovations that initially might not seem that impressive to established companies. They might even perform worse on the metrics those established companies and their current best customers care about.
Right, they might seem simpler, cheaper, maybe less powerful at first.
Exactly, but they have other advantages. Maybe they're smaller, more convenient, more affordable, or easier to use. And eventually they get better and better, and they outstrip what markets need from the old, established products. They end up displacing them by creating entirely new market segments or changing the basis of competition.
And we see this perfectly illustrated with the example of microprocessors, right?
Yeah. The source uses that example. Microprocessors were once seen as capable only of limited functionality compared to the big, complex logic circuits and mainframes back in the day. They looked like toys to the big players. But they were small and simple, and that enabled affordable logic and computation in applications where this previously had not been feasible. Think calculators, then personal computers.
And this resonates so deeply with Apple's strategy under Jobs, doesn't it? Introducing simpler, more integrated products that often appeared less powerful on paper compared to, say, a Windows PC with all its options.
Right.
But they created entirely new markets or reshaped existing ones by making technology accessible, intuitive, elegant.
Think of the iPod versus the feature-packed MP3 players, or even the Walkman before it. Or the first iPhone against existing smartphones or feature phones. Initially, they didn't have all the features, maybe.
Right, no copy-paste on the first iPhone.
Exactly. But they were simpler, more elegant, and they offered this compelling new user experience that the incumbents, the established players, just couldn't or maybe wouldn't embrace because they were too focused on their existing ways of doing things.
So Jobs was a master at spotting those opportunities where the big guys were vulnerable, where they were unwilling or unable to adapt to these market shifts or these disruptive innovations, often because they were too busy listening to their current, most profitable customers who wanted more of the same, just slightly better.
Precisely. And by doing that, he created these significant strategic advantages, or strategic moats, as some sources call them, for Apple.
Okay, strategic moats, like a castle moat.
Yeah, exactly like that. These are powerful, sustainable competitive advantages that protect a company's long-term profits and market share. They make it really difficult for competitors to successfully attack or even enter the market.
Like how the source mentions LinkedIn leveraging multiple network effects. Everyone's on there, so employers are on there, which means more people join.
Right. That built a massive strategic moat around professional identity and networking. It became indispensable.
And Jobs' genius lay in carving out similar, often entirely new, market spaces where Apple could dominate. Places where the rules were different, where Apple's strengths in integration and user experience were paramount. He wasn't usually fighting head-on in those established red oceans.
No, he consistently looked for that adjacent possible, that simpler, more elegant solution that would eventually outcompete the complex, often clunky status quo. He created his own blue oceans. 4. The integration of technology with liberal arts. Products as experiences.
Looking at all this together, what really stands out to me is how Jobs didn't just build technology. He seemed to infuse it with something more profound. He famously talked about the intersection of technology and liberal arts. This wasn't just engineering for him, was it? It was about aesthetics, intuition, a really deep understanding of human experience.
Yeah, while the specific Jobs excerpts we're focusing on might not explicitly use the phrase liberal arts over and over to describe his method in detail, the underlying principle is absolutely clear. It's consistent throughout his entire philosophy and career.
How do we see it?
Well, that emphasis we discussed on a seamless end-to-end user experience, or the craftsmanship even of the parts unseen, that points directly to a holistic approach, right? Where technology is deeply infused with aesthetic and humanistic considerations.
It's not just function, it's form and feel.
Exactly. And we also see it in his meticulous attention to sophisticated visual design and branding. The outline mentions the Paul Rand NXT logo presentation from 1985.
Right, Carl Rand, the legendary graphic designer.
A true artist, someone who deeply believed in the power of simplicity, elegance, and wit to convey meaning. And Jobs sought him out, paid him a fortune to design a logo that perfectly captured the vision for NXT. That alone shows you the deep respect Jobs had for the power of design of art to elevate technology.
So it suggests that Jobs really viewed technology not just as, engineering or purely utility, but almost as an art form itself.
I think that's fair to say. Like, it was a medium through which human creativity, intuition, maybe even emotion could be expressed. The ultimate goal seemed to be creating tools that were not just functional, but also beautiful, intuitive, and, crucially, emotionally resonant. He wanted to bridge that gap we often feel between, cold, intimidating machinery and human warmth.
Bringing soul to the silicon, as someone said, making technology feel more human. He wasn't just building a device. He was crafting an experience that connected on a deeper level.
And this holistic vision, this integration, it really culminated in creating a more intuitive and accessible future, didn't it? For everyone, potentially.
How so?
Well, that deep focus on user experience and simplicity meant that Apple products just felt natural to use, almost like an extension of the user themselves, rather than a complex tool you had to wrestle with.
Right.
And that intuitive interaction, it draws heavily on principles of human psychology, on good design thinking, making incredibly complex technology feel accessible and approachable instead of needing thick instruction manuals.
Which nobody reads anyway.
Right. Apple products were designed more to be discovered, to guide the user naturally through their functions just by exploring. It was a complete paradigm shift from, the text-based command line interfaces that dominated early computing. You didn't need to learn a special language to use a Mac or later an iPhone.
And what's particularly relevant for you, the listener, is that this approach led to products that didn't require that steep learning curve, didn't need extensive training. They helped make technology democratic in a way. It wasn't about bragging about the raw computational power or the sheer number of features crammed in. It was about the elegance and the ease with which that power could be wielded by everyday people.
That blend makes technology feel less intimidating, doesn't it? And far more empowering for the user. It allows people to tap into capabilities they might not have otherwise even attempted.
You think about, your grandmother learning to use an iPad to video call grandkids, or a young child instinctively navigating an iPhone. That kind of accessibility is a direct result of Jobs' insistence on integrating those liberal arts principles, empathy, intuition, aesthetics, right into the core of the technological design.
It really is technology designed to serve humanity rather than forcing humanity to adapt to the technology. A subtle but profound difference. Outro.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground today on the Steve Jobs method, a deep dive into product and design. It's truly a fascinating and definitely at times challenging look into the mind behind some of the most iconic and transformative products of our era.
Definitely. And just to recap, we've really uncovered several essential elements of his method, haven't we? There's that uncompromising drive for perfection, extending even to those unseen details.
Like the circuit board.
Right. Then his fierce, some might say iron-fisted, control over the user experience to achieve that radical simplicity. His visionary reliance on intuition, often flying in the face of conventional market research.
The Alexander Graham Bell quote comes to mind.
Yeah. Then there's his demanding, sometimes bruising leadership style that pushed teams to achieve what often seemed impossible, the reality distortion field in action.
Right.
And finally, that profound, even if sometimes implicit, integration of humanistic design principles, the liberal arts thinking, into technology, effectively creating products as experiences.
And for today's innovators or leaders, or really anyone looking to build products or services that truly stand out in what feels like an increasingly crowded market, These principles, even though they were sometimes controversial in how he executed them, they offer incredibly powerful lessons.
They absolutely do. They force us to question conventional wisdom, don't they? And to really consider the true cost and the potential reward of pursuing radical innovation.
They certainly do. But let's maybe leave you with this final provocative thought. Steve Jobs clearly pursued insanely great at a significant personal cost and definitely an interpersonal cost, often leading, as the sources say, to bruised egos and challenging human relationships. So for you, as a leader or creator in your own field, how much of that uncompromising drive for perfection, even at the risk of those bruised egos or strained relationships, are you willing to embrace to achieve your boldest vision?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And what ultimately is the optimal balance between, say, a visionary's singular intuition, the valuable insights you can glean from data and user feedback, and the collaborative wisdom that comes from a diverse team, hopefully, a less bruised team?
Is it possible, do you think, to be both uncompromisingly visionary and profoundly empathetic? Or are those two qualities always going to be in tension when you're genuinely striving for the truly insanely great?
That's something to ponder, isn't it?
Definitely something to ponder as you navigate your own projects and passions. Thank you so much for joining us on the Deep Dive. We really hope this conversation has given you a fresh perspective and maybe some powerful insights to apply in your own world.